Hello and welcome to the Freedom to Flourish podcast. I'm Dr. Joel Miller. Usually I'm here with Dr. Tim Augustiniak, my good friend and colleague. Unfortunately, he's not going to be able to make it this week for this week's episode, but he will be with us back again in our next episode. So we are flying solo today here. So it's going to be good though. I've got a lot of good stuff for us and I think it's going to be very enjoyable. So before I recap last episode and jump into what we're going to talk about today, I want to share two things with you. Number one is congratulations. The congratulations for the fact that you're listening to this, because if you're listening to this, it tells me a couple of things. It tells me that you're interested in improving your health and that you're interested in improving your nutrition. And that is not an easy thing. It's definitely not a comfortable thing. But I applaud you for that. And I think that it's going to be extremely helpful for you and your health. And then number two, I want to give a little bit of a warning to you. My warning is simply in regards to, understanding that the more that you look into nutrition, the more that you learn about food, you're going to start to understand that a lot of the food that we're surrounded with today, here in the States at least, the food in our grocery stores, food at our restaurants, is really, really bad. It's just really bad for us. It's toxic. It's lacking nutrients. It's full of different chemicals. And so I give you that warning ahead of time because as you go through this, it's very possible to be discouraged. And this healing journey, as you go through this learning journey about nutrition, it's very easy to be discouraged. And I don't want that for you. That is not the plan. That is not the goal, to be discouraged. The goal and the plan and the purpose is to be empowered, to accomplish what you want to accomplish and to become the person that you were designed and created to be. So with all that said, I want there to be hope, and that's certainly my and Dr. Tim's encouragement for you in this journey, is just that you're filled with hope. You're feeling empowered to go and have the knowledge and just the ability to make great choices with your nutrition and with your health. So with all that said, let's jump into things. So here's a quick recap of what we talked about last episode in part one. Dr. Tim kind of walked us through overall nutrition as far as macronutrients, micronutrients, and essentially kind of what that means, what that is. If that's something you're not super familiar with, would definitely recommend that you go back and check out episode 13 and listen in on those things. When we talk about nutrition, another reminder, nutrition is food in general there's two purposes there. One is for pleasure, and then one is for fuel for our body to function and to be as healthy as possible. And so we want to look at food through that lens. The second thing that we spent a decent amount of time walking through last episode was really key nutrients. When we talk about protein, fats, carbs, when we talk about what are the main benefits, like how should we be thinking about these foods, and then what foods, what are our favorite sources of those foods, and what to think about when you think about, okay, getting a protein in your meal and things like that. We talked a little bit about intermittent fasting in general and for women, and how that's going to be a little bit different for women. And then we talked a little bit about caloric intake, how much is enough. And, one of the things that Dr. Tim and I continue to discuss is the fact that most people don't eat enough food. And that's very controversial because the way that we are just kind of always fed these messages that, you want to limit your calories, you don't want to eat too much or you'll get overweight and unhealthy. And that's not necessarily the case. One of the things that Dr. Tim and I constantly talk about is that it's about the quality of food and the type of food, not so much the quantity. And where essentially we end up is that when you have the right foods, you actually usually are going to need more. You're going to need more of the right foods. And you'll find that is where your body's able to flourish the best, when it has the right nutrients and enough of the right nutrients. And so wanted to share that and kind of add that piece in there. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about a couple things. We're going to talk about, number one, key things that you want to avoid in your foods and in your nutrition. We're going to talk about the reasoning behind that and why, and what that looks like. we're going to jump into just nutrition. I'm going to share just kind of what a few days of nutrition might look like for myself. I know Dr. Tim and I eat very, very similarly. And I think at some point I'll certainly encourage him to share what that might look like for him as well. But I'm going to walk you through what I eat for breakfast, what lunch might look like for me, what dinner might look like, desserts. I'll even talk a little bit about condiments, and then I'll touch on eating out. How do you eat out and be healthy? And I can tell you there's not a lot of great options, but I will share some with you. So with all that said, here we go. Key things to avoid. I'm going to give you the list, and then I'm going to walk through, explain a little bit of these and explain why we need to avoid these. So number one is going to be processed foods. You definitely want to avoid processed foods. Number two, sugars. 3, inflammatory seed oils, artificial sweeteners, natural flavors, food dyes, trans fats, GMO foods. Now, this list is not a fully complete list. These are just the overwhelming main components here. Now, I want to make sure, listener, that you understand the why behind, why we want to avoid these bad foods. A lot of people understand that they're bad for us, but I think the perception can vary between people. So I want to walk through this with you. Bad foods are not just neutral. And what I mean by that is it's not that they don't have nutrients in them. It's not that they're just void of nutrients, but it's actually that the different chemicals, different things in them cause stress on our system, which then results in our body having to take the other vitamins, the other minerals that we have to use it to neutralize this food, to use it to reduce the inflammation that's been caused by this food. And so when we look at food, it's not just, hey, this food over here is healthy and full of nutrients, but this food has no nutrients. It's really that this is going to improve our health. This is going to take away from our health. It's going to actually reduce our nutrients. It's going to lead to nutrient deficiencies and that kind of thing. So that's something that I want you to understand, because it's not just, oh, I'm going to have this food and it's not going to be healthy for us, but it's actually that it's going to cause and lead to other nutrient deficiencies. It's going to swing our health in the negative direction in that way. So processed foods, number one, there is a ton of preservatives in processed foods. And when you look at the package of a food, hopefully you are focusing on whole foods and not the packaged foods, because the packaged foods always going to be full of preservatives. And when you look at the ingredients, you're going to see a huge list of ingredients. The longer the list, number one, the less healthy it's going to be, the more unhealthy it's going to be. And then number two, what I'll share with that, when you look at the list, if you can't pronounce the words or the ingredients in that list, chances are you probably shouldn't be putting that in your body. Number two is sugars. Sugars are only going to cause oxidative stress on our cells. Oxidative stress, a lot of these cause oxidative stress, but essentially oxidative stress is inflammation with our cells. The simplest short way I can put it is it's inflammation with our cells that our body has to take our antioxidants and use that to essentially neutralize the oxidative stress. Oxidative stress is what leads to all sources of inflammation, all sources of aging and speeding up and increasing the aging process, and just overall depleting us of nutrients and worsening our function. Inflammatory seed oils. This one is huge. So what we're talking about here when we say inflammatory seed oils is any food that either has or has been cooked with vegetable oil, canola oil, soybean oil, sunflower oil, safflower oil, peanut oil. The list goes on and on. The only safe and healthy oils that we should be consuming is going to be olive oil, coconut oil, avocado oil, and then I would say sesame seed oil as well is going to be a great one. Keeping in mind that you don't want to cook with the olive oil, you don't want to cook with sesame seed oil, because cooking with those things is actually going to heat that up, and it's actually going to change the structure of it chemically. It's going to be harder for our body to process and use. So essentially all of these inflammatory seed oils, they increase oxidative stress. They increase inflammation. What happens is they also increase the omega-6s. Our body then has to take different nutrients like zinc, magnesium, B6, sometimes even vitamin C, to try to neutralize and combat these. We have a huge epidemic across our country here in the States of magnesium deficiencies and zinc deficiencies. Those are two huge ones. There's a lot of others, but those are two huge ones. And one of the reasons I'm convinced as to why that is because of all the inflammatory seed oils that we consume. And so if you look in any package, in any food, and you see these things, you should really, really avoid them. So avoid the vegetable oils, the canola oil, the soybean oil, all the different oils. You want to avoid those. Artificial sweeteners, these are considered neurotoxic. Okay, so we're talking about aspartame, which is also in like NutraSweet, sucralose. We're talking about acesulfame, potassium. These are just a few examples of artificial sweeteners. If you look up online, you can get a list of them and kind of see there's all kinds of different types, but these are the main ones. Aspartame and sucralose, by far the most common. These artificial sweeteners are fake. They're not real in the sense that, God did not make these. These are man-made, and they're toxic to our nerves. And, the nervous system literally connects everything in our body and is so important with our health. And so we should really, really aim to avoid these things. The next one I'll say is natural flavors. Natural flavors can somewhat come from natural sources, but one thing that's important to understand is that the process that they undergo to become the natural flavors, they basically have undergone processes that add in so many different chemicals and just essentially produce this substance that is so far from natural. Now, with both of these things, artificial sweeteners, natural flavors, I'll even add in the food dyes and even GMO foods. There are so many links with these things in research and clinical studies, clinical experience with doctors that link these different things to in being, endocrine disruptors, right? So they're going to throw off hormones. They're going to cause a lot of imbalances. They're linked often to autism and ADHD and overall gut health and immune system health for kids and adults. And so these are all things that you want to definitely avoid. Food dyes, definitely want to avoid those. Definitely don't use those in any of your cooking or desserts or anything like that. And definitely watch out for the food dyes in snacks and different foods and candy and things like that are so often put in front of us. Trans fats are not natural. Okay, so when you get into essentially chemistry and all that verbiage, you have cis, which is CIS. That is a natural type of molecule, whereas trans means it's essentially been heated up, and so it actually changes its structure to a non-natural way, something that's not found naturally in nature. And so trans fats they're not natural. Our body's not able to process them and really use them for any really good benefits. And so they can ultimately lead to a lot of inflammation. Hydrogenated oils are something that I really wanted to mention because hydrogenated oils are found in so many different types of foods and products, especially things like our peanut butters and different, a lot of times different desserts, but a lot of different snacks like crackers and different things like that, that we are so often consuming. And essentially what hydrogenated oils are, is they are an oil that's been heated up and put through this chemical process to where now it becomes like a solid at room temperature, essentially. So when we think of like Jif peanut butter, that is a massive source of hydrogenated oils. And the problem with these oils is it's been shown that they have a half-life of roughly 3 to 6 months. Don't quote me on that. I know there's some different studies, but roughly 3 to 6 months half-life with hydrogenated oils, in that in 3 to 6 months, half of whatever you had consumed is still in your body. And so you don't want to consume these things. They're pretty nasty for us. And then the last thing I'll mention here that we want to avoid is GMO foods. So genetically modified foods. A lot of people say, well, these can't be that bad for us. Well, essentially genetically modified foods, they're not real foods. I mean, they've essentially been changed scientifically to a place that was natural and no longer is natural. Here's the truth at the end of the day. Our body doesn't do well with unnatural foods, unnatural anything. And so what happens then is it's going to lead to more inflammation. It's going to lead to more dysfunction in our body. And when you add the GMO foods with the processed foods and the inflammatory seed oils, you add all these things together, what that gives us is what we see a lot here in America, in the United States here, is we see a ton of chronic inflammatory conditions. We see cancer increasing more and more every year. We see things like autism and inflammatory diseases and autoimmune issues. We see all of these issues continuing to increase decade after decade, and there's a reason why. And so, I won't get into the powers that be and why these things are allowed in our country. I think that's an interesting conversation, but I think we should be educated in these things, why they're bad for us, and essentially where we find them. And we need to be on the lookout for them to make sure that we avoid them. So these are all the different things to avoid. Now, I want to again continue to emphasize it is so, so important to read the labels of the food that you're buying and that you're eating. If you can learn to read the label, not to just look at the calories, not to just look at protein and carbs and things like that, but actually read the ingredients and understand the different ingredients and what is going to cause issues there. It's so, so important so that you can watch out for different foods that even might appear healthy. They might even say on the label something about it being natural or organic or whatever, but you look at the ingredients and you see, oh, this one's filled with sunflower oil. This one's filled with canola oil. You want to look at those different ingredients and you'll see either the things that we talked about, or you'll see a massive list of ingredients, or you'll see a ton of different things that you can't even pronounce. And all in all, you want to avoid those things. And so, again, my encouragement is if you've never really read the labels of things before, whenever you're going out grocery shopping again and you pick something up and you say, hey, I wonder about this, if this would be good for me. Turn it over, look at the ingredient label, and just kind of process and ask yourself a few questions. Number one, are there a lot of ingredients or just a little? Number two, are these ingredients bad for me? And that's where you kind of have to read through, okay, do I see these inflammatory seed oils? Do I see artificial sweeteners and natural flavors? Do I see, a lot of added in sugar and things like that? So you want to look at those things. If you can develop some skills with that and just kind of continue to grow in that, oh my goodness, you're going to be so much healthier, not only a month from now, but how about a year from now? How about 10 years from now? How about 30 years from now? And along the way as well. So, all right, let's keep moving here. What does nutrition look like for myself? Again, one of the things that we talked about last time is just the importance of protein, and we continue to talk about that. And as we go through these different foods, I'll give you some sample meals that I might have on a fairly regular basis. I want you to understand my thought process kind of goes along these lines. Number one, the quality is so important. Okay, the difference between normal beef and grass-fed beef is night and day. Okay, the animals that comes from, one of them is jacked full of grains, steroids, antibiotics, and they just have a ton of infections. That's going to be the non-grass-fed, and the grass-fed beef is going to come from healthy cows that are able to roam in the pasture. Because they roam in the pasture and they're not fed a ton of grains, they don't get sick. They're not jacked up on antibiotics and steroids because of those things. And ultimately their meat and their just overall produce is way, way healthier for us. So the quality is a given as I go through these things. Essentially you want to get the most natural, unprocessed thing you can. Obviously local is going to be best. Organic generally is a great idea. But of course with each food, it kind of depends on where it's coming from, the brand and things like that. So when I'm looking at nutrition, I'm thinking, okay, what am I going to eat? Here's kind of what it looks like day to day. So number one, I'm first asking myself, what kind of protein am I going to have? Because of all the benefits of protein, the necessity for it with handling cortisol and all these different things, you want to focus on that first, I would argue. So number one is protein. What's my protein going to be? Number two, I'm usually thinking, okay, where am I going to get my calories from? Am I going to get it more from some of these fats, some source of fats, whether that's a avocado or different nuts or even different things like eggs, things like that? Or is it going to be more from a combination of that and some carbohydrates, whether that's some kind of rice or quinoa or different vegetables or fruits, things like that. Number three, I'm thinking about nutrient dense foods. I'm thinking about where am I getting my nutrients from? Okay. So that could be anywhere from fruit and berries to vegetables and potatoes and squash and zucchini to even fermented foods, whether it's sauerkraut or raw goat kefir or something like that. So those are the kind of the three things I'm thinking about: protein, calories, and the nutrient dense foods. Okay. Breakfast. Here's three just very kind of basic sample meals I just kind of drew up that I will have from time to time. Number one, I might have some eggs. usually about 4 to 7 eggs, raw cheese. Okay, these eggs are going to be some form of organic pasture raised, whatever whatever I can find at the store that is going to fit me best here. Raw cheese, and then usually maybe 1 to 2 slices of gluten-free toast, so that I can get that grass-fed butter in. And so that's one meal. I might have, even for breakfast, I might have 2 grass-fed beef burgers. That's going to be generally with some kind of gluten-free bread for buns. And then I'll usually put some grass-fed butter on that as well. And then a third meal here. This one is primarily if I'm on the go, I'm in a hurry, I don't have a lot of time in the morning. I'll grab a couple scoops of grass-fed whey protein shake. Okay. Uh, Very easy to digest because of the source again, but 2 scoops of grass-fed whey protein with maybe some sort of nuts like Brazil nuts or something like that, just to help support with some calories, and then some nutrients. So maybe some kind of fruit, some banana, oranges, maybe some berries. That's if I'm on the go. That's if I'm in a hurry. So I still get my protein, some calories, and a lot of good nutrients and antioxidants. What does lunch look like for me? So lunch is going to look like, generally it's going to look like 2 to 3 grass-fed beef patties. Those are usually going to be burgers with the gluten-free bread. It's going to sometimes look like siete chips. So siete chips are usually found at Costco. You can probably find them other places, but essentially they are cooked with basically cassava flour. And then there's no inflammatory seed oils. They think they use avocado oil, which is going to be way, way less it's not, your body's gonna be able to handle that way, way better. So siete chips, and then, some berries or fruit or something like that. Another option for lunch, I might do some chicken in a salad. I might do chicken with rice or quinoa. I'll usually throw some avocado on there and some fruit and things like that. And then 3 for lunch, I might do sardines on some kind of a spring mix salad. And then I'll add in some berries, some carrots, maybe some peppers, things like that. I'll get to the condiments in a minute, but with the salads, you generally want to go for a salad dressing that does not have soybean oil, vegetable oil, and all these toxic oils. You want to find generally something that's more of an avocado oil base that's going to be safe and good for you there. So what does dinner look like? Well, dinner might look like some grass-fed beef burgers. It might look like some grass-fed steak from the local Whole Foods or Sprouts or whatever. Again, maybe some siete chips and salsa. Maybe a glass of raw milk or goat kefir with that. And another meal might be lamb or bison, maybe turkey, all of that with some kind of vegetable, potato, squash, zucchini. And then again, usually maybe a bowl of berries and maybe some honey on that. And then lastly, I might even do some kind of a breakfast, some bacon, eggs, sweet potatoes, raw cheese, that kind of thing for a dinner meal. So again, with all of these things, it's like, what's your protein going to be? Depending on how much work you do physically, it's like, okay, that and other things with your health, you might determine, okay, calories, what does that look like? And then nutrient dense foods should be a top priority because we've got to get those nutrients. Lastly there, I'll talk about desserts here and then condiments, and then we'll get into some of the restaurant stuff. With desserts, I keep it fairly simple, but I try to have some variety with things. If I, have a little bit of a sweet tooth, a lot of times I'll just do some frozen berries with honey. That's going to be a lot of glucose, a lot of fructose, but I'll usually do that if I'm training a lot, working out a lot, things like that, to help replenish those stores. But it can be very sweet and full of a lot of antioxidants as well. I love, 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 love grass-fed ice cream. And if you can't get grass-fed ice cream, you can make your own ice cream with raw milk, or creamer, raw creamer from some local farm there. And that is amazing. And then the third thing I love is maybe some homemade cookies or something called Heavenly Hunks. Okay, those are something that you generally get at Costco. Heavenly Hunks. They're some of the best cookies that you can get from the store. They're amazing. But if you're making homemade cookies, generally you're going to want to use some sort of gluten-free flour of some kind. And then you're going to, want to sweeten it with coconut sugar, maple syrup, honey, things like that. And then, instead of different oils and things like that, you're going to use some kind of grass-fed butter. It's going to be usually a great thing. Just melt it, stir it in. It usually works out really, really well. Condiments, With ketchup, you really want to avoid the high fructose corn syrup. You want to watch out for all the added sugars, and then generally you want to get organic if you can. For mustard, you generally want to get organic. Mustard's not too big of a deal. Avocado-based mayo is going to be really important. Most mayonnaise are going to essentially be filled with all these inflammatory seed oils. So if you can get an avocado-based, that's going to be really, really, really helpful. Barbecue sauce is kind of a tricky one because a lot of times they have high fructose corn syrup, and they're usually loaded with sugar. So you got to be careful of that. And then in general, when you're looking at others, other different condiments, things like that, please understand that most of these are going to have bad oils in them. Just about every dipping sauce from restaurants are going to have some form of oil, usually soybean oil, sometimes canola and vegetable, things like that. A lot of other condiments are going to have monosodium glutamate, some form of MSG. And then to be honest, they're just going to have ingredients that we can't really pronounce. So all those things you want to keep an eye out for and really try to find different condiments that don't have these things in them. And then always a good idea to sweeten your food or just add a little bit more flavor is just to add honey to it. Pour some good local raw honey, maybe some pure maple syrup, or some kind of a quality salt like Redmond's or pink Himalayan sea salt, something like that. Weekly fasting, is that a good idea? I think it's a great idea. One of the things that I'll often try to do is take one of my lightest days of the week. Usually it's going to be on the weekend, and just fast for 24 hours with just water. I mean, you can add lemon juice or lime if you want to, but fasting is a great idea to just give your body a break and allow it to kind of recover and heal. There's a lot of other benefits to fasting, especially if you're doing it for maybe spiritual reasons and things like that. But from just a basic health perspective, would definitely recommend it. All right, eating out. Last thing here. I feel like we're going 100 miles an hour, but I hope this has been helpful for you. Eating out, favorite restaurants. I will say number one, it's just for people that are in the know, that have the knowledge of a lot of the different things that we've talked about. You start to understand that most restaurants are going to have a ton of processed food. It's not really fresh at all. And then number two, you're going to find that most of these restaurants are cooking using the inflammatory seed oils, which means it doesn't matter how healthy your not salad, but how healthy your sandwich is or how healthy your meal is, your eggs, whatever it is. If it's cooked in these inflammatory seed oils, I mean, it's coated in this thing that's going to cause a lot of inflammation. So there are some different apps like Seed Oil Scout, I believe is the app or maybe website that you can look up and find different restaurants in your area that don't have these oils, that don't cook with them. I know some people will say, go to restaurants and ask the waiter if they can just cook the food in butter or something like that. You can always do that. I don't know how many restaurants actually will do that for you, but it's always worth a shot. So with all that said, what are the restaurants I actually like to go to as just a holistic doctor, and restaurants that I generally would enjoy food at with colleagues and things like that? One of the top ones is called First Watch. Okay, so it's generally kind of a breakfast place, open in the morning till about 2:30 in the afternoon. First Watch is generally very clean and good. I actually really like this restaurant called Chicken and Pickle. If you don't have it close by, then don't worry about it too much. But their restaurant that's fairly new over the past couple years. They have a ton of pickleball courts, which is fun, but that's beside the point. They do have grass-fed burgers and a number of things there. So a lot of their food is actually sourced locally as well, to their area. And then I was talking with one of their employees the other day. There's only like 2 or 3 things on the whole menu that are that come frozen, and that aren't made in house. So a lot of their foods are actually made in house, and they're not as processed, as far as coming in frozen and things like that. So that's chicken in capital N pickle. Most farm to table restaurants are going to be good. Of course, if you generally just read the website and kind of look at their marketing, you'll generally be able to tell if their food's going to be more fresh. Sometimes they might talk about, not cooking with the inflammatory seed oils and things like that. So those are all things to pay attention to. Some of the other common ones that people think are healthy, and I would say, they're better than most, is going to be Chipotle, Qdoba, Moe's, Cava, if you have it. It's kind of the Mediterranean Chipotle. Those restaurants are, I would say, decent. To be honest, I really don't eat there much, maybe once a month or something like that if I'm out and about. And the reason why is because even though their foods are pretty minimally processed, they still generally, are coming with a decent amount of preservatives, and there's usually some kind of oils mixed in there somehow, whether it's cooking the meat in the oils or something else. So those are some different restaurants that the Chipotle, Qdoba, all those things. Those can be, they're the better options than not. They're going to save you a lot more inflammation compared to a lot of the other fast food restaurants. But if you can obviously make your own food, prepare your own food, that's great. Maybe have some kind of a good, protein shake like grass-fed whey protein or a good bone broth protein. Just keep that on hand if you're ever on the go and need something quick. Fruit is always a great idea, things like that. So, all right. Well, I think that's all that I wanted to get through here with you guys. And I hope this has been extremely helpful for you. Again, my purpose in all of this is to help empower you, help you to learn and grow in knowledge so that you can be as healthy as possible and make the best decisions for you, your family, your loved ones. I think, one of the things that Dr. Tim and I often will talk about is that, the healthier you can be, yeah, it'll save you money, time, and pain over the years, things like that. But the healthier you can be, the more life generally you're going to experience. And what I mean by that is, when your mind is clear, when your energy is good, when your sleep is good, you're able to do more things. Instead of eating that certain meal, Sunday afternoon and having to take a nap for 2 hours because it's so bad for you, you can eat something good and feel good and energized after your meal and have the next 2 hours just be extremely full of life, whether that means you're being more productive or just in a great mood and things like that. So a lot of people say you are what you eat. There's some validity to that. I think nutrition is super, super important. And so I hope that this has been extremely helpful for you. Super quick close off. Part 3 is going to be coming next. Dr. Tim's going to be back for that one. We're going to go through different diets. A lot of patients have different questions about diets, and we're going to jump into a bunch of them. We're going to talk about them, kind of what they are, basic understandings, but we're also going to talk about, what type of person would fit in, those different diets and really the pros and cons of those diets. And then, I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about what we recommend, what we do personally. And so I'm excited for that one. All right. Again, I'm Dr. Joel Miller, located here in the Dallas, Texas area, seeing patients here in the practice, the Freedom Health and Wellness practice here. You can find me online on Instagram, different social medias. Just look up Dr. Joel Miller. You can go to my website, drjoelmiller.com. That's drjoelmiller.com. You can read more about the practice and just more about myself. If you have any questions, definitely reach out. Would love to answer them, whether it's Dr. Tim Augustiniak or myself. And we hope this has been a blessing to you. Hope this has been helpful for you. All right. Without further ado, we will see you guys in the next one. Peace.